Reborn, he came to propose. I stepped past the screen. A poor scholar wants the richest heiress? Dream on. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. The scorching smoke, mixed with the acrid stench of charred flesh, nearly choked me. Pei Jingxing's hypocritical face contorted in the firelight. He struggled desperately to free his wrists from my iron grip, but was unable to move because of the ferocity I mustered in my final moments. Eugene Tang, you're out of your mind. You're the daughter of the richest man in the country. If you just let me go, you'll still have all the wealth and luxury you could ever want. He screamed in terror. I watched as the flame slowly licked at the stack of family ledgers he had gone to such great lengths to seize, the very evidence he had once used to curry favor with the powerful, which had led to my parents being framed and brutally murdered. Now, at last, they had become his burial offering. I laughed loudly, blood spurting from the corners of my eyes. My laughter pierced through the sound of the collapsing roof and reached all the way to the underworld. Pei Jingxing, if there is an afterlife, I will make you watch with your own eyes as your path to success is crushed to pieces beneath my feet. Consciousness shattered beneath the collapsing roof beam, plunging completely into boundless darkness. When I opened my eyes again, the tip of my nose was filled with the subtle scent of sandalwood, rather than that nauseating smell of something burning. I sat up abruptly, my heart pounding wildly. My hands clenched instinctively, but all I felt was the soft texture of the silk quilt. I looked down, my palms were as white as jade, with not a single trace of a burn from the fire. Young lady, are you awake? The master is talking with young Master Pei in the main hall right now. They're discussing the marriage proposal. Chuer walked in carrying a bronze basin, and the sight of her young, vibrant face made my breath catch for a moment. She was Chuer, the very same Chuer who, in my past life, had been beaten to death by Pei Jingxing's men for helping me hide a letter from home. I said nothing. I pulled back the brocade quilt and stepped onto the floor barefoot. The icy sensation spread from the soles of my feet throughout my entire body. It was a tangible reality. What time is it now? I asked in a steady voice, without a hint of unease. My lady, it's just past the sea hour. The master said that today, young Master Pei brought his family's heirloom jade pendant. If their conversation goes well, the marriage will be finalized. I said nothing more, casually threw on a coat, walked around the screen, and headed straight for the main hall. Pei Jingxing, if you want to climb to the top by trampling on the Yu family's piles of bones, you'll have to ask me first whether I've ever given you that chance. The curtain at the entrance to the main hall was drawn aside, revealing a warm and harmonious atmosphere inside. Father Yushindo was stroking his beard, smiling warmly at the man seated below him. The man was dressed in a blue robe that had been washed until it was almost white. Though his appearance betrayed his poverty, he deliberately adopted an air of aloofness and pride. It was none other than Pei Jingxing. This jade pendant, my nephew Pei Xian, is of excellent quality. Though it is by no means a rare treasure, it does reflect the scholarly heritage of the Pei family. My father's voice was deep and resonant, tinged with the affection typical of an elder. Pei Jingxing quickly rose to his feet and bowed deeply to his father, a gesture he had practiced countless times, conveying just the right degree of humility. Uncle Yu, you flatter me. Though I come from a humble background, I am well aware that Jean Tang is exceptionally intelligent. If we were to form a marriage alliance, I would do everything in my power to protect her and ensure her well-being for the rest of her life. Will you protect me for the rest of my life? Those words felt like a dull knife, stabbing deep into my heart. In my past life, he had made such solemn vows as well, and I truly believed him. Not only did I bring half of the Yu family's assets as my dowry, but I also helped him establish trade routes. In the end, however, all I received in return was a court order sentencing my entire Yu family to execution for his collusion with others. Without pausing as I stepped through the door, I walked straight to the shadows behind the screen and watched as that romantic tale was about to unfold once again. Father, are you sure we should finalize this marriage so quickly? My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a sharp chill as it abruptly cut into their conversation. My father was taken aback when he heard this. He turned to look at me, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. "Jean Tang, what are you doing here? Are you feeling any better?" Pei Jingxing clearly hadn't expected me to show up suddenly. He quickly smoothed out his clothes, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were filled with just the right mix of deep affection and nervousness. "Jean Tang, what are you doing here? I heard from Chuyer that you weren't feeling well. I really shouldn't have disturbed you, but my longing for you." I walked past my father and stood directly in front of Pei Jingxing, my gaze intense as I locked eyes with him without a trace of fear. He instinctively took half a step back. Just a mere scholar, and he thinks he can marry the daughter of the richest man in Jiangnan? I spoke word by word, my voice as calm as if I were discussing today's weather, yet the sarcasm in my words pierced his face like icy needles. The room fell instantly silent. Even my father's smile froze on his face. Pei Jingxing's face alternated between pale and red, as if someone had torn away his mask of hypocrisy right in front of everyone. "Jean Tang, how could you be so rude?" My father's face darkened as he scolded me sternly, but there wasn't much anger in his eyes, mostly just confusion. He looked at Pei Jingxing, trying to cover for me. "Please don't take it personally, my dear nephew. I've spoiled this child rotten lately, and he's lost all sense of propriety." Pei Jingxing clenched his teeth, forcing down the fleeting flash of malice in his eyes, and resumed his expression of restrained anguish. "Jean Tang, if you have any misunderstandings about this humble student, please speak your mind freely. Above all, do not look down upon a sincere heart simply because of my background." Sincerity? I let out a cold laugh and turned to look at my father, my gaze revealing a calmness and resolve I had never shown before. "Father, I mean no disrespect, but there is one thing I do not understand. Since young Master Pei comes from a scholarly family and has studied the classics for so many years, why, when I saw him outside the city a few days ago, was he getting into a scuffle with a few street thugs outside a gambling den, and had even racked up a substantial gambling debt?" Pei Jingxing's expression changed completely. He looked up abruptly and stared at me. His gaze no longer held feigned tenderness, but rather undisguised panic. He never would have imagined that I, who was supposed to obey his every word and be completely devoted to him, would actually say something like that, or even find out about his gambling debts. "I didn't." "Jean Tang, who's been spreading those baseless rumors?" he retorted urgently, a fine sheen of sweat beading on his temples. I turned slightly to one side, my gaze drifting casually over him and toward the attendant pacing anxiously outside the door. The attendant's arms were bulging with a pawned ancient zither, the very instrument that Pei Jingxing had claimed was a family heirloom. "If father does not believe me, he is welcome to send someone to investigate the gambling house in the eastern part of the city." My tone was calm, yet every word cut to the core. Moreover, since Jean Tang is the sole daughter of the Yu family, her future husband must be capable of upholding the family's honor, not someone who, relying merely on a few lines of poetry, seeks to transfer the Yu family's legacy, built up over generations, to another household. As soon as those words were spoken, the smile vanished completely from my father's face, replaced by a scrutinizing gaze. Although he loved me dearly, he was, above all, Yu Xinda, a man known for his ruthless decisiveness in the business world. He felt an instinctive wariness toward a future son-in-law who might pose a threat to the family's interests. "Is what Jean Tang said true?" My father's voice grew solemn, and that aura of authority typical of a businessman instantly filled the room. Sweat trickled down Pei Jingxing's forehead and along his cheeks. His otherwise handsome face now looked utterly disheveled. He knew that if he were cast out of the Yu family's gates today, not only would the marriage be called off, but his fragile reputation would also be ruined in an instant. "Uncle, this is definitely a misunderstanding." I didn't let him finish. I simply raised my hand slightly to signal Chuyer to go fetch my father's bookkeeper. "Father, when it comes to marriage, it's only right that the couple be of equal social standing, and above all, of good character. I absolutely refuse to entrust my future to someone who can't even keep his accounts in order and hides his true circumstances." Pei Jingxing looked at me, and the panic in his eyes was finally replaced by a deep, venomous hatred, the very nature he had been trying so hard to hide. Just as he was about to offer a few more words of rebuttal, a deep, menacing voice came from outside the door. The voice came from outside the courtyard, carrying a cold, metallic edge that seemed to freeze the air. Everyone inside instinctively turned their gaze toward the doorway. Before Yujinde even had a chance to send someone to announce his arrival, a man dressed in a dark brocade robe stepped into the main hall. He was tall and slender, with a piece of dark jade hanging from his waist. His eyes were bottomless, and whenever he looked at someone, his gaze carried a sharpness that seemed to pierce right through their soul. As I looked at that face, my heart skipped a beat. It was Xia Huajin. In a past life, he didn't enter government service until a few years before my death. With an iron fist, he forced open a breach in the corrupt court. Pei Jingxing, in an attempt to curry favor with him, sent countless lavish gifts, yet he never even set foot inside the gates of his mansion. Mr. Yu, I understand your father has been unwell of late, so he specifically instructed me to deliver these tonics. I never expected to stumble upon such a lively scene. Xia Huajin walked in nonchalantly, casting a faint glance at Pei Jingxing, as if he were looking at a worthless withered leaf, before his gaze settled on me. No one knows that I've died once before. No one knows what kind of hatred is churning beneath this calm exterior of mine right now. I nodded slightly, polite yet distant. Thank you for your concern, Minister Xia. There have indeed been some trivial matters at home. I hope you'll forgive me for any inconvenience. When Pei Jingxing recognized the man approaching, his expression changed abruptly, and his earlier fluster instantly gave way to terror. Although he was a top student at the academy, in the presence of someone like Xia Huajin, who held a truly high position, he was nothing more than an ant. He scrambled to his feet in a panic, and the bow he made was noticeably several times more humble than before. Even his sleeves were trembling slightly. Thank you, Your Honor. I am Pei Jingxing. It is an honor to meet you. Xia Huajin didn't reply. He simply sat down in the armchair, picked up the hot tea that Chuer had just poured for him, and took a light sip. If you can't pay back your gambling debts, you'll lose more than just your reputation, you'll probably lose the bones in your fingers, too. His tone was calm, as if he were discussing today's weather, but Pei Jingxing felt as if he'd been struck on the head with a club. His face instantly turned as pale as paper. He had kept this gambling debt extremely secret. Aside from a few creditors, no one else should have known about it. Cold sweat poured down Pei Jingxing's forehead like rain. He clenched his jaw tightly, and a dry, raspy sound escaped his throat. Your Honor. I have no idea what you're talking about. Someone must be maliciously slandering me. I watched him struggle desperately with a cold gaze, and a strange sense of satisfaction welled up inside me. I wasn't in a hurry to act. Since Xia Huajin had shown up at this moment, he must have come here with a specific purpose. Malicious slander? I took a step forward, my voice as cold as ice. Young Master Pei, if you truly feel wronged, why not go to the magistrate's office and ask the upright magistrate to settle this, whose handwriting is on that IOU in your arms? Pei Jingxing suddenly turned to look at me, no longer hiding the venom in his eyes. It was the desperate struggle of a cornered beast. He finally realized that Eugene Tang, who was usually so gentle and considerate and always did whatever he asked, was now pressing him at every turn, leaving him no room to breathe. Jean Tang, how could you be so heartless? Pei Jingxing said, his voice trembling. I agreed to this engagement with you solely to maintain harmony between our two families. Why are you being so aggressive? He was still trying to win his father's sympathy under the pretext of bringing harmony between the two families. His father, Yu Xingde, looked extremely displeased at that moment. Although he was a merchant, he placed great importance on his reputation. If a scholar were to ruin the Yu family's reputation at this moment, he would certainly not let the matter rest. My dear nephew, my father said in a subdued voice, having finally made up his mind, since Jean Tang has her doubts about the marriage alliance between our two families, I think we should put it on hold for now. As for the debts you've incurred, if they're true, please settle them as soon as possible. Don't let them cause any trouble that might drag the Yu family down with you. The moment those words were spoken, Pei Jingxing felt as if he'd been plunged into an ice cave. Not only had he lost the chance to marry me, but he'd also completely lost face in front of Xia Huajin. He'd lost this round utterly and completely. I looked at Pei Jingxing's almost contorted face, yet my heart remained completely unmoved. Those shops he used in his past life to frame my father, in this life, I will never let him lay a finger on them. Father, now that the marriage has been called off, shouldn't we settle the account for the silver he previously forced the bookkeeper to pay out? I turned around and instructed the bookkeeper, go and settle all the accounts for the past few months, every single penny that young Master Pei has embezzled from the Yu family under the guise of a betrothal gift. Make him pay back every last penny, down to the last coin. The bookkeeper gave a curt reply, and the look he gave Pei Jingxing was tinged with a touch more contempt. Pei Jingxing staggered slightly and nearly fell over. Xia Huajin watched it all in silence, his fingertips idly tracing the rim of his teacup, a faint hint of amusement flitting across his hawk-like eyes. Miss Yu, you're quite the strategist, Xia Huajin said suddenly, his voice low. But in this world, if you don't uproot the weeds completely, they'll spring up again when the spring breeze blows. I looked at him. His calm eyes showed not the slightest ripple, yet concealed unfathomable depth. Minister Xia, you're worrying needlessly. As long as one's foundations are deep enough, even the fiercest spring winds won't be able to shake them. Xia Huajin gave me a deep look, as if he were trying to peer into my soul. He didn't say anything else. Instead, he set down his teacup, stood up, and walked out. Please take good care of your father's health. The weather here in Jiangnan is definitely about to change. He walked away very quickly, leaving behind only a faint, cool scent of sandalwood that lingered in the main hall for a long time. I stood there, looking at my father's face, which betrayed a hint of guilt, knowing deep down that although Pei Jingxing had temporarily stepped back, he would never accept this outcome, and the forces behind him had likely already set their sights on me. I lowered my head to hide the fleeting cold glint in my eyes, then turned to Chuer and instructed her, go over the household accounts again, especially the silk trade routes that Pei Jingxing used to be involved in. My father let out a deep sigh, walked over to me, and hesitated as if he wanted to say something. Jing Tang, what happened just now was indeed a bit excessive. After all, you're a young lady from a respectable family, behaving like that. Father, I interrupted him, my voice gentle yet firm, if I don't take a firm stance, the Yu family will eventually fall apart because of one scholar's greed. I didn't explain any further. After all, my father was still too soft-hearted. In these turbulent times, weakness is an original sin, a lesson I learned the hard way in my previous life, at the cost of my own life. I stepped out of the main hall. The flowers in the courtyard were in full bloom, yet there was a chill in the air. Pei Jingxing was probably cursing away in that shabby hut on the outskirts of town right now, but it didn't matter, this was just the beginning. Chuer followed behind me, looking somewhat worried. Miss, it seems that young Master Pei hates you with a vengeance. What will happen in the future? I didn't answer her. I just walked straight to the storeroom where the ledgers were kept. I had to take advantage of the fact that Pei Jingxing hadn't caught on yet to completely root out all his infiltrators within the Yu family. The door to the storeroom creaked open, and dust swirled through the room in the sunlight. I stepped inside. The volumes of ledgers here were a testament to my father's life's work in my previous life, and they were also the evidence that Pei Jingxing ultimately used to frame my family, the Yu clan. I opened the bottommost one, and sure enough, the handwriting was sloppy, and there were clear signs that several entries had been altered. Miss, something's not right here. Chuer leaned in and saw at a glance that there was something wrong with the numbers. This isn't a normal surplus. It looks like someone's tampered with the figures. I let out a cold laugh and slammed the ledger shut. Pei Jingxing, if you want to play dirty in business, I'll make sure you lose everything, down to your last pair of underwear. I turned around and said to Chuer, first thing tomorrow morning, take all these accounts to the magistrate's office. I'm going to accuse him of embezzlement. Chuer's eyes widened in shock. Miss, won't this make a big deal out of things? It has to be big, I said, gazing out the window at the sky as it gradually darkened, my eyes as still as a pool of stagnant water. If we don't make a big deal out of it, how are we going to lure the snake out of its hole? I know that Pei Jingxing isn't just backed by that gang of thugs, there are also several businessmen who've had their eyes on the Yu family's riches. If I play this move right, I can lure out the real threat lurking in the shadows. A faint, dusky blue hue began to appear on the horizon, and the wind picked up as clouds gathered. Standing at the entrance to the warehouse, I gazed at the waning moon, knowing full well that here in the Jiangnan region, a series of intricate plots targeting Pei Jingxing had already quietly taken shape. Inside a shabby tea house on the outskirts of town, the air was thick with the bitter scent of cheap tea. Pei Jingxing slammed the coarse porcelain bowl in front of him down hard on the table, chipping the rim and causing the murky tea to splash out, soaking the cuffs of his well-worn shirt. You, how dare you humiliate me in public? He growled under his breath, his eyes bloodshot. The gentle, refined facade he usually maintained lay shattered at his feet, revealing the greedy and twisted nature beneath. The man sitting across from him wore a tattered straw hat. A shadow covered half his face, revealing only a chin bulging with flesh. The man snorted derisively and tapped his fingers on the table, producing a dull thud. Young Master Pei, you took our deposit and promised to hand over the Yu family's silk trade route to us. But look at you now. They don't regard you as a son-in-law. Instead, they treat you like a thief and are on their guard against you. Pei Jingxing clenched his teeth, the veins on the back of his hand bulging. She wasn't like this before. If I just beg her one more time, she'll change her mind. Change your mind? I think you're just desperate for money. The man in the straw hat stood up, glaring at him with a cold, menacing look. If nothing happens within 3 days, the compound interest you owe the gambling house won't be something your measly scholarly knowledge can cover. When that time comes, we'll chop off the hands you used to write your essays to settle the debt, then let's see how you'll ever pass the imperial exams. Pei Jingxing stood frozen, able only to watch helplessly as the man walked away. He slumped back onto the bench and slammed his fist down hard on the table, the resentment in his heart growing wildly like weeds. At that moment, inside the Yu residence, I was sitting upright behind my writing desk, holding a goat hair brush in my hand. Dusk was falling outside the window, and a few faint lights glimmered like beans. I listed, one by one, the amounts that Pei Jingxing had embezzled over the past half-year from the accounts. Each entry corresponded to a transaction receipt from the gambling den. These figures were not only evidence but also a noose around his neck. Miss, these are the accounts just brought back from the silk shop after the inventory check. It seems some of the shop managers are not quite following orders. Chuer carefully placed several ledgers on the corner of the table, her voice barely audible. If they ask, just say that young Master Pei has always been a favorite of the master. With this audit, isn't it possible that... I looked up as the tip of my brush traced a thin line of ink across the paper. Tell them the Yu family never keeps traitors in its ranks. Since you don't want to work here anymore, pack your bags and get out of Jiangnan. My tone was extremely flat, yet it made Chuer flinch. She had been with me for many years, but had rarely seen me act with such decisiveness. In that instant, she seemed to sense that the young woman before her had shed her girlish fragility and taken on a stern demeanor I had never seen before. I understand. I'll go take care of it right away. Chuer hurriedly withdrew, her footsteps sounding particularly hurried in the silent corridor. I put down my pen, stood up, and walked over to the window. The night in Jiangnan was as cool as water, and the sound of oars came drifting from the river in the distance. Pei Jingxing, since you enjoy toying with people's hearts, I'll let you taste what it's like to be buried alive in the trap you set yourself. The next day, the news spread like wildfire throughout the city. Everyone had assumed that the eldest daughter of the Yu family would marry Scholar Pei, but who could have imagined that, right before everyone's eyes, Miss Yu would hand over a list of embezzlement to the county magistrate's office. This was not merely a call-off of the engagement. It completely cut off Pei Jingxing's escape route. I slipped into a dark red brocade gown and pushed open the door. In the courtyard, my father was pacing anxiously back and forth. When he saw me come out, his weathered face was filled with worry. "Jean Tang, now that things have come to this, have you thought about the consequences? That Pei Jingxing may be a scholar, but if his reputation is ruined, it will affect our family's business." "Father, if he truly played by the rules, how could he have left so many vulnerabilities?" I walked slowly over to my father's side and poured him a cup of light tea, my movements as steady as ever. "Besides, the Jiangnan Chamber of Commerce is holding its new season silk tasting event in 3 days, and Magistrate Xia will be attending. If we can't even sort out our own family affairs, how can we possibly hope to take first place at the tasting?" My father looked at me. A flicker of surprise crossed his eyes, which quickly gave way to a complex expression. It was as if he was realizing for the first time that his daughter, who had grown up under his wing, harbored such far-reaching plans. Are you really going to attend the tasting event?" "Not only must I attend, but I must also ensure that the name of the Yu family once again resounds throughout Jiangnan." I gazed out the door as the morning sunlight fell upon me, casting a sharp silhouette. That afternoon, I took Chuer out the front gate and headed straight for the largest restaurant in town. Since Pei Jingxing was in debt from gambling, what he needed most right now was silver. He would surely find someone to sell off the antiques and calligraphy he had previously swindled from me, and all I had to do was sit back and wait for him to fall into my trap. From a private room on the second floor of the restaurant, I peered down through a crack in the folding screen. The main hall was bustling with noise, and sure enough, Pei Jingxing appeared in a corner, humbly trying to sell a white jade paperweight to a pawnshop owner. I curled the corners of my lips, my voice clear yet icy. "Go tell the shopkeeper that that item was stolen from our Yu family. If he dares to accept it, he'll be handling stolen goods." Chuer took her leave. In no time at all, the sound of a heated argument could be heard from downstairs. Pei Jingxing's hypocritical face instantly turned the color of a pig's liver. He tried desperately to defend himself, but was promptly thrown out the front door by the pawnshop clerk. He collapsed onto the steps in a disheveled heap. In the sunlight, he looked so small and pitiful. I walked down from the second floor and stopped not far from him. Pei Jingxing looked up, and the moment he saw me, a glimmer of hope flashed in his eyes, only to be instantly overshadowed by fear. "Jean Tang." "No, Miss Yu, I really didn't steal anything." "That was..." I didn't let him continue. I just looked down at him as if he were a speck of dust. "Pei Jingxing, Jiangnan may be vast, but there's no place for you here anymore. If you want to stay alive, you'd better get out of here, and stay far away." He looked at me, trembling all over, as if he were seeing me for the first time. He tried to get up, but was held down by a bailiff who had rushed over upon hearing the news. Because of that list of embezzlement charges, the authorities had already begun investigating him. As I watched him being led away, I didn't feel much joy. This was only the first step in my plan, because I knew full well that the real game had only just begun. "Miss, where are we going now?" Chuer asked softly from behind. "Let's go to the Chamber of Commerce." I smoothed out my cuffs, and my gaze regained its calm. "Let's go see that Magistrate Xia. It's about time he learned that the Yu family isn't some pushover that just anyone can push around." The streets were crowded with people, and I walked ahead, my back straight as an arrow. The clamor behind me gradually faded away, and yet, for some reason, Xia Huajin's deep, icy eyes once again came to mind. The Chamber of Commerce is situated on the shores of Mirror Lake, its ornately carved and painted buildings hidden behind weeping willows. At this time of year in years past, the area was always dominated by the major silk merchants, and the air was filled with the luxurious scent of silk. Today, however, the atmosphere outside the entrance carries a sense of eerie oppression. I stepped onto the stairs, with Chuer close behind me. The guard at the gate recognized me as a member of the Yu family. Though he did not stop me, there was a hint of a meaningful scrutiny in his gaze. "Miss Yu, coming here at a time like this, I doubt you're here just to enjoy the scenery, are you?" A middle-aged merchant dressed in a brocaded robe with a floral pattern approached me with a forced smile. He was the manager of Chen's silk shop. In my previous life, it was he who colluded with Pei Jingxing to forcibly purchase several of our Yu family's key silk-producing estates at below-market prices. I paused, without looking at him, and simply brushed the dust from the hem of my skirt. Speaking in a calm, measured tone, I said, Manager Chen is joking. The Chamber of Commerce's appraisal has always been based on merit. The Yu family's silk comes from deep within the Wu region. I've heard that this year, Magistrate Xia's standards for tribute goods are extremely stringent, so I'm curious to see whether the quality of the goods you've prepared is truly up to this demanding task. Mr. Chen's eyelid twitched, and his smile grew stiff. Ha. Miss Yu, you'd better focus on cleaning up the mess in your own household first. I hear that scholar Pei Jingxing has already become a stain on the Yu family's reputation, even before he's officially married into the family. I turned my head, and my eyes, as still as a deep pool, met his gaze without the slightest flicker of emotion. A mess? I chuckled softly. The slight curve of my lips actually made him instinctively take half a step back. Pei Jingxing is nothing more than trash I swept out while cleaning house. If Manager Chen is so interested in this, could it be that you're cut from the same cloth as that trash? No sooner had the words left his mouth than the hall fell deathly silent. Manager Chen's face turned the color of a pig's liver, but he dared not lash out because of my imposing presence. Passing through the colonnade, I walked straight into the main hall. Inside, Xia Huajin was seated in the seat of honor, a piece of plain silk clasped between his slender fingers. Beneath his downcast eyes lay an inscrutable expression. Seated to his left and right were several officials from the Jiangnan region. As soon as I walked in, the atmosphere in the hall suddenly grew tense. I stepped forward to bow, my movements so precise that not a single flaw could be found. Eugene Tang, at your service, Magistrate Xia. Xia Huajin looked up, his gaze sweeping across my cheek like a cold star, before finally settling on my composed and self-assured demeanor. Miss Yu certainly has a way with a joke, he said in a cold tone that betrayed no emotion. The appraisal event is about to begin. Why have you come at this hour? Have you brought some rare treasure, or are you here to complain about someone again? The hint of sarcasm in his tone prompted the officials present to let out a low chuckle. However, I wasn't provoked by his words. I simply walked calmly up to the display case and casually opened the wooden box that Shuer was holding in her arms. This isn't a complaint, but a request for verification. I took a bolt of silk called Smoky Glow from the box and gently unfurled it. The silk shimmered with iridescent hues in the sunlight, looking as if a real glow of sunset were drifting through the hall, startling everyone present, who all rose to their feet. What's this? An official exclaimed in surprise. This silk was woven using ancient techniques, involving 72 steps, a craft that has been lost for a century, even in Jiangnan. I looked at Xia Huajin, my gaze calm yet radiating an unquestionable confidence. Minister Xia demanded that the tribute be as light as a cicada's wing yet strong enough to resist tearing. We of the Yu family have achieved exactly that. Xia Huajin set down the silk he was holding and slowly stood up. He walked over to me. We were so close that I could even smell the faint scent of cedar on him. What a craft that's been lost for 100 years. He looked down at me, and his gaze finally took on a hint of scrutiny. Eugene Tang, you certainly live up to the title of the wealthiest man in Jiangnan. You flatter me, sir. I tilted my head slightly to the side, just enough to avoid his intense gaze. Business is like a battlefield. I simply don't want the Yu family's century-old legacy to fall into the hands of second-rate scoundrels. My remarks were extremely measured. They not only made my position clear but also implied my disdain for the previous farce. A faint smile played at the corner of Xia Huajin's lips. He waved his hand to dismiss those around him, leaving only a few guards in the hall. You're clever, but you're also very bold, he said in a low voice, his fingertips gently tracing the edge of the silk. The person behind Pei Jingxing has already been secretly rallying the merchant guild's forces, intending to crush your father's cash flow. Do you really think this single bolt of silk is enough to save the Yu family? My heart skipped a beat. I had never heard of this move in my previous life. Could it be that my rebirth had caused some unknown change in the game? I suppressed my emotions, my expression remaining impassive. Since you say so, Your Excellency, I presume you already have a plan in place. Why should I help you? Xia Huajin retorted, a chillingly mocking glint in his eyes. I took a step forward and looked him straight in the eye without fear, because Your Excellency needs me. The taxes from Jiangnan need the Yu family's reputation. The two of us stood facing each other. It felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room, and only the chirping of the cicadas outside the window seemed particularly loud. Just then, the sound of hurried footsteps outside the door broke the tension. Sir, there's been an incident. A guard stumbled and scrambled his way into the room, his face ashen. The warehouse. The warehouse is on fire. That's all the finished products the Yu family just delivered. My pupils suddenly contracted, and I instinctively clenched my fists. Fire! Fire again! That familiar, searing pain seemed to spread throughout my body in an instant. I struggled to suppress the shivers running through me and turned to look at Xia Huajin. Is it Pei Jingxing? I asked hoarsely. No, Xia Huajin said, his gaze chillingly cold. Even more ruthless than that fool are the real masterminds who've been lurking in the shadows all along, determined to prevent the Yu family from regaining its former status. He walked straight toward the door without even glancing at me as he left. If you want to save your family's legacy, follow me. If you can't even put out a fire like this, you'd better take your father and leave Jiangnan as soon as possible. I took a deep breath, forced myself to suppress the chill that was creeping up my spine, and lifted the hem of my skirt as I hurried to keep up with him. A cloud of smoke billowed out from the warehouse in the distance, obscuring half the sky. The flames twisted wildly in the wind, like countless sets of fangs eager to tear me apart. I stood before the raging flames, gazing at the hellish scene before me, but the calm in my heart gradually crumbled as the fire spread, leaving only a will that bordered on madness still burning within me. Chuyer, go gather all the employees of the Merchants Guild who are loyal to the Yu family. I turned to Chuyer, who was standing behind me, completely petrified with fear, and gave her an order. My voice was soft, but as cold as iron. This fire must not only be extinguished, but it must also burn its way to an outcome they never could have imagined. The flames raged, and the warehouse beams emitted a bone-chilling crack as they snapped in the inferno. The thick smoke stung my eyes so badly I could barely keep them open, but I didn't back down a single step. Xia Huajin stood 3 zhang away from the fire, the hem of his black robe fluttering in the heat. He watched coldly as the piles of expensive silk turned to ashes, then turned to look at me, his eyes as deep as the abyss. Is that all you've got? If you burn through it all, what will you use to compete at tomorrow's tasting? I suppressed the turmoil in my eyes and looked at a crew member who had just rushed out of the burning building, asking calmly, is the back door to the warehouse locked? Miss, the fire's too intense, the back door is chained shut from the outside. The shop assistant knelt on the ground, his face covered in soot. I looked at Xia Huajin, a faint smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Your Honor, this is by no means a simple fire, it's clearly an attempt to trap the Yu family inside. Since they want to play with fire, let's see exactly who ends up getting burned. Xia Huajin raised an eyebrow, seemingly quite surprised by my reaction. I turned to Chuyer, take all the prepared ledgers and the original inventory list from the warehouse to the county office. While you're there, tell the constables that the half-broken lock shackle found at the fire scene, engraved with the character Chen, is the only piece of evidence we have to catch the arsonist. You mean Manager Chen? Xia Huajin's thin lips twitched slightly, a chill in his voice. He may be greedy, but he's not that stupid. What if it's for that 10,000 taels of silver reward, or for the so-called top spot in the Jiangnan Merchants Association? I looked up into the depths of the firelight, my gaze showing not a hint of hesitation. Someone behind the scenes has promised him a huge reward, and I know better than anyone who that person is. In order to curry favor with the powerful, Pei Jingxing once secretly sold one of my personal jade pendants. The buyer was none other than the puppet master behind the Jiangnan Chamber of Commerce, a faction that had long since infiltrated the Qin family and was plotting to take control of the Jiangnan Silk Road. The glow of the fire illuminated my face, and the scorching heat actually made me feel more alert. I turned to look at Xia Huajin, my tone steady. "Your Excellency, today's fire has destroyed the finished goods of my Yu family, but at the same time, it has forced those vermin who were hiding in the shadows out into the light. Now, it is time for you to take action." Xia Huajin gave me a deep look. His piercing gaze seemed to pierce right through my soul. He suddenly reached out, and his slender fingers brushed lightly against my shoulder, yet they did not touch my clothes. "You Tang, you're certainly very different from the reclusive young lady who only knows how to embroider, as the rumors suggest." He turned around and whispered a few words to his attendant. "Since you've provided a lead, it would be rather tactless of me not to accept it." The fire in the distance was gradually dying down under the authorities' forceful efforts to extinguish it, leaving nothing but rubble scattered across the ground. I knew that Manager Chen must still be rejoicing at having destroyed the Yu family's life's work, unaware that he had already become the scapegoat pushed forward to take the blame. As I looked at the ruined warehouse, I felt not a shred of remorse. In my previous life, it was right here in this very warehouse that Pei Jingxing, in full view of the authorities, falsely accused my father of embezzling tribute goods, sending us to the guillotine. Now, however, the entire situation has changed. Far from destroying the Yu family, this fire has instead become my opportunity to strike back. "Miss, where are we going now?" Chuyer tugged at my sleeve, looking a little uneasy. "Back to the mansion to change." I set off toward the mansion, each step as steady as a rock. Tomorrow's tasting event, that's where the real battle will be decided. The lights lining the street flickered in the twilight, and the air still carried a lingering scent of burning. I walked into my study, where a stack of freshly organized ledgers lay quietly on the desk. I sat down, dipped my brush in thick ink, and slowly wrote a name on the blank sheet of paper. He was the true mastermind behind the Yu family's downfall in a past life, and he was also the shadow lurking behind Pei Jingxing at that moment. I knew that as long as he dared to show his face tomorrow, I could ruin his reputation. There was a soft knock at the door, and immediately afterward, the study door opened a crack, revealing my father's face, which looked much older, peeking through the opening. "Tang, there are rumors going around that all the tribute items in the warehouse have been destroyed. As for the Merchants Guild, should we ask for time off first?" I put down my pen, looked up at my father, and said in a gentle yet firm tone, "Father, there's no need to take time off. Tomorrow, not only will I go, but I'll also bring something even better than that offering to usher in the moment that belongs to the Yu family." My father looked at me, his eyes filled with doubt, but in the end he sighed, nodded, and turned to leave the study. I watched the candlelight flicker, listened to the occasional sound of the night watchman announcing the hour from outside the window, and tapped my fingertips lightly on the tabletop. That man's ambition was immense. He wasn't content with merely destroying this batch of silk, he also intended to completely oust the Yu family from the Jiangnan Chamber of Commerce at tomorrow's appraisal session. On the day of the tasting event, the main hall of the Jiangnan Chamber of Commerce was decorated in a solemn and austere manner. Representatives from all the major silk merchants were in attendance, and a stifling tension hung in the air. Manager Chen stood in the center of the crowd, a barely perceptible smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, glancing toward the entrance from time to time, as if waiting for the show to begin. As I stepped into the main hall, a murmur of hushed whispers filled the room. Many people cast glances my way, some mocking, some sympathetic, as if I, Yu Tang, were nothing more than a stray dog about to meet its end. Xia Huajin sat at the head of the table. His teacup tapped lightly against the table, producing a crisp sound. He did not look at me, but merely cast an indifferent glance at Manager Chen, a look that made Manager Chen's back stiffen involuntarily, and his smile fade slightly. "Miss Yu, did that shipment burn completely?" Manager Chen strode forward, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've heard that the Yu family's entire inventory has been destroyed. If that's true, shouldn't someone else take the top spot in the Merchants Guild for a change?" I walked up to the booth, my gaze passing over Manager Chen and settling on the man in gray standing not far away in the shadows, his head kept bowed. He was the mastermind's right-hand man, and the so-called advisor who had strategized for Pei Jingxing in my previous life. With Manager Chen showing such concern for the Yu family's warehouse, anyone who didn't know better might think you were the one who started the fire. My voice was calm, like a drop of clear spring water falling into boiling oil. The hall suddenly erupted in an uproar. Mr. Chen slammed his fist on the table, furious and humiliated. Don't make such baseless accusations. At this trade fair, we're here to talk business, not engage in idle chatter. We really do need to talk business. I tilted my head slightly and gave Chuer a subtle nod. The wooden box was opened once more, but this time, what was revealed was no longer ordinary silk. The piece of fabric I took out of the box was as thin as a cicada's wing and emitted a faint, cool glow. It was, in fact, a piece of ice silkworm silk that had never before been seen. Before the crowd had a chance to gasp, I turned to face the man in gray, my tone as casual as if I were asking a passerby, "Sir, I wonder if this ice silk would be to your master's liking?" The man shuddered, slowly raised his head, and revealed a sinister face. He hadn't expected me to call him out on his identity right away. "I don't understand what you're saying," he said in a low voice, his eyes darting away. "It's okay if you don't understand," I said, walking around the display case and closing in on him step by step. "But I have evidence proving that the fire was no accident, and the inscription at the source of the fire matches the pattern on this waist badge you're wearing." Xia Huajin set down his teacup and finally looked up in this direction, a hint of sharpness in his gaze. With a casual wave of his hand, two guards immediately stepped forward and pinned the man in gray down on either side. "Since Miss Yu has evidence, take her away for questioning," Xia Huajin said calmly, yet with an air of authority that brooked no argument. Manager Chen's face turned ashen, and his legs gave way. He tried to flee but was immediately stopped by the guards. The main hall of the Merchants' Guild erupted into chaos. The merchants, who had been watching the commotion just moments before, now fell silent, each one afraid of being implicated. The man in gray struggled to defend himself, but the guard clamped his hand firmly over his mouth and nose. Before he was led away, he fixed me with a piercing stare, his eyes brimming with venom, as if to warn me that my actions had long since provoked the powerful force standing behind him. Ignoring his hostility, I turned to Xia Huajin and bowed in a formal manner. "Your Excellency, I'm afraid it would be inappropriate to discuss the rest of this matter here at the Merchants' Guild." Xia Huajin stood up, his gaze lingering on me for a moment before shifting past me to the dark clouds outside the door. "It really is too noisy in here," he said, striding toward the door. "Come with me." We walked through the colonnade, heading straight for the secret room behind the Chamber of Commerce. The room was dim, with only a single lamp on the table casting a faint, yellowish glow that illuminated the intricate map of the power dynamics in Jiangnan hanging on the wall. Xia Huajin sat down in the seat of honor, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. The rhythm of those taps, one after another, felt like a sledgehammer striking the heart. "That dog, Pei Jingxing, is currently hiding in the small courtyard by the north gate. My men have him cornered. How do you intend to handle this?" I walked over to the candlelight and gazed at the symbol representing the Yu family on the map. A cold gleam flashed in my eyes. It was a plan for the conclusion of this life, and also the final blow against the true mastermind who had been stirring up trouble from the shadows. The candlelight inside the secret room flickered wildly in the draft, casting ghostly, distorted shadows on the walls. I lowered my gaze to the map and lightly tapped a few key junctions with my fingertips. "Hand him over to the authorities to be tried on charges of collaborating with the enemy in arson, and make the trial documents public." My tone was flat, as if I were reading aloud an unimportant bill. Pei Jingxing prides himself on his talent and learning. What he fears most is ruin and disgrace. Letting him die in shame and regret will cause him more pain than a quick death. Xia Huajin looked at me quietly. His eyes, which were usually calm and unruffled, now held a hint of curiosity. He didn't ask why I had such an accurate understanding of Pei Jingxing's intentions. He simply nodded slightly, signaling the guards waiting in the shadows to carry out the order. "What about the mastermind behind it all?" he asked. I walked around the desk and over to the narrow ventilation window in the secret room, watching the clouds outside as they gradually lowered. Manager Chen is merely a pawn. The person who truly controls the trade routes of Jiangnan will certainly step forward personally to negotiate with Magistrate Xia as soon as he realizes the trail has gone cold. I turned around and met Xia Huajin's bottomless gaze. When the time comes, the Yu family is willing to serve as bait to lure him into the trap. Xia Huajin paused for a moment, then let out a soft chuckle. It was the first time he had ever shown his true emotions in front of me. That smile carried a touch of languor, yet exuded a tension that was impossible to ignore. You sure aren't afraid to spend big. For the sake of the Yu family's peace and stability for centuries to come, a little risk is worth it. I said no more, bowed, and took my leave. By the time I stepped out of the private chamber, darkness had completely fallen outside. Chuer was waiting outside the door, holding a lantern. Its dim, yellow glow illuminated her anxious face. Miss, young Master Pei has been taken away. A hint of tremor crept into Chuer's voice. She clearly felt a sense of satisfaction at his fate, yet also harbored a vague sense of unease. I took the lantern, without looking back at the dim, secret chamber behind me. The wind lifted the hem of my skirt, and in the stillness of the night, I felt a long-lost sense of peace. The suffocating sensation from my past life, when Pei Jingxing had gripped my throat, had finally vanished without a trace. In the days that followed, everything unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. Pei Jingxing's crimes were listed one by one in open court, and the mouth that had once uttered so many hollow vows could now only let out piercing screams in the damp, gloomy confines of his cell. The Jiangnan Merchants Guild underwent a reshuffle, and the Yu family successfully secured a spot as a tribute supplier thanks to that roll of ice silk. As my father gazed at the plaque sent by the guild, his eyes welled up with tears, and the look he gave me held a gravity and reliance I had never seen before. Standing on high ground at the Yu residence, I watched the river in the distance rush eastward. The intrigues and schemes that once weighed so heavily on me that I could hardly breathe have now faded into the past. I know full well that this era of turmoil is far from over, but at least the Yu family now possesses the strength to defend this realm. The afterglow of the setting sun fell on the eaves, and I raised my hand to shield my eyes from the glaring light. A figure had appeared at the entrance to the courtyard. I didn't know when. It was Xia Huajin. He wasn't wearing his official robes, but simply a set of everyday clothes, which made him look exceptionally aloof and proud. He walked slowly over to me, his gaze also fixed on the surging river. That person has already shown up, he said in a low voice, his tone unusually calm. How do you intend to handle this, Your Excellency? I looked back at him calmly, my heart now completely at peace. He turned his head, and his eyes, which were usually so sharp, were now tinged with a hint of warmth. Eugene Tang, the winds of Jiangnan have indeed changed, but now that this upheaval has occurred, where do you plan to go? I looked into his eyes, which held the same resilience and loneliness that I felt. In this power struggle, we are both pawns and players. It doesn't matter where we go. I let out a soft chuckle, feeling the cool breeze brush against my cheeks, my mind clear and serene. What matters is that the Yu family still stands. The splendor of Jiangnan will never be swallowed up by darkness. He said nothing more, but simply stood beside me, gazing at the full moon rising over the river. The moonlight cast a cool glow over the courtyard, stretching our shadows long and far. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Thank you.